Alright, we're back today. You guys finally get to hear the engine run in this thing. It was an experience, at the least. This is about 1 year from getting the engine running. I have about 20,000 miles on it so far. Obviously, I stripped the paint on it, built the camper shell in the back. A lot of other little fabrication things. I'll show you guys more of that later. I'll show you guys the rear sway bar that I put on the No Limit Engineering rear sway bar. I put a 1 1/8 or 1 1/16 or something like that. Front sway bar in, airbags front and back, stuff like that. The engine's awesome. Next, I need to decide what's up for the truck. If you watch any of my camper shell builds, you'll see I still have some modifications to the camper shell I need to do. But I'm trying to decide if I'm gonna stop messing with this truck and move on to a different one, or if I'm gonna go all in on this one and maybe try to fit a C4 Corvette suspension under here so I can get an independent rear end on it. They're all aluminum, and then they have aluminum front control arms, and lighten this truck up a lot. I think if I built a cross member and a manual rack and painting, I think it could drop a couple 100 pounds off the front of this truck that's already pretty light in the front. Trying to decide if I'm gonna go that route. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any suggestions or ideas of what you guys think I should be doing. Also, I hate the intake. I'd love to have like a car intake, or I don't know if I want to go full like supercharger or anything on this thing. Obviously money's an issue, so I might just do a car intake, keep it super clean, and shave the rest of the firewall and do some more stuff like that. But if you guys like the channel, subscribe, like it, let me know what you guys think I should be doing. Also, if you haven't seen, I got more camper shell videos on my channel, and I also have more videos on my blue long bed 67. I think I'm going to sell that. That's kind of my next step, I think, is to buy some more tools. I need to get rid of some stuff. So I think I'm going to sell that blue long bed. I'm going to try to ship it out here and then fix the transmission real quick and then sell it. I want to buy English wheel and a TIG welder and some different things. So if you guys are interested, let me know. Make sure and watch my channel, show me trucks, and soon I'm going to have bike videos where I travel around in my C10, so it's going to be called C10 BMX. So let me know what you guys think about the channel. I think it was 19 days on the swap. Pretty much after I moved it, I wasn't as motivated to get my truck done, so I took a couple days off. I had some things going on, so from beginning to end, it took 19 days. I could do it in way less. Now I can do it in way less. It was just some learning experiences, like the power steering pump, reservoir was in the way. Driveshaft training. I made some things that I wasn't expecting to have to make. Fabrication always takes way longer, and that's why it costs way more. So, I'll show you guys around the truck a little bit, and I'll show you guys more, give you guys some more details, but obviously you guys can tell my truck is bare metal now. I'll get into more of that later, but I've been driving the truck. It's been awesome. This is what the engine bay looks like now. It's a little dark in there, but it's running. This is, I think, February 2nd? Super Bowl Sunday, whatever the day that is. I'm about to go watch the Super Bowl. But everything runs. It's way lighter weight and way more horsepower. That 305 probably had, at the end of its life, 120 horsepower at best. That thing was struggling hard. This engine has a ton of miles on it, and it still has way more power, and it's lighter up front. Not on these, it's on the training. She's running, boys. Oh, so happy. Dash is not in. First thing I didn't go over is off of this is your fuel rail that runs up and over, and runs this length. On these style engines, this has a fuel inlet and a fuel return for your extra fuel that's not used. I think this right here is your fuel regulator. That controls your pressure, and that's why it sends the extra fuel back. What I wanted to do is I used the factory fuel lines that came off the Envoy, because there's like a press connect fitting here. You can I don't know, you can reflare that and use some AN fittings, and I would maybe do that next time, and I might do it later once I actually change this intake out. But so I used these factory fuel lines. I ran them down back here. You can kind of see them back here. And then all I did from there was I flared it and ran it with brake line the rest of the way back, or hard line, whatever you want to call it. And I just flared it and ran it the same as you would run your brakes. Obviously your brakes use way more pressure than I think it's 58 or something like that psi of pressure for your fuel. Your brakes, I think, use it in the thousands. So I ran that to the back, and I did the same thing in the back. I used these press-on connect factory fittings back there. Yeah, because I wanted this flex hose. I know that's hard to see, but that's the factory flex hose, because your engine moves just the slightest, your chassis moves, stuff like that. So hardline will eventually wear out your fittings and cause leaks. Yellow ring, that's your oil dipstick. So basically what I did is I had cut and re-welded this flange on to move it. Also on these Envoy XLs, it's aluminum block. I don't know if all the aluminum blocks are like this or not, but your dipstick is actually run through your oil pan. So in these you have to re-drill a hole, which I think is a 3/8 hole, into your actual block, and you have to do that with your oil pan off. That way you can clean all the metal shards out. That way that's not blowing through your engine, just ruining your investment, if that's what you want to call it. So that was a little bit of a pain, because you need that tight or it'll leak. I have all sorts of oil leaks here. That's why this engine's super dirty. But I don't think I have a leak down there. But I think my valve covers leak, and this breather. I actually ran a breather instead of running. This is your positive crankcase ventilation that usually runs up into your throttle body right there. I didn't like that, because all that does on these engines is suck oil into your intake and then foul up your spark plugs. I ran a breather back here too. You can see that. Not the best, but I didn't want it sucking all that oil in. Another thing I did, which is real hard to see, is the red tube is actually your transmission dipstick. On these, I swear, it is about to hit your hood. They come up so freaking high, like up here. And so I did the same on that. That one I just cut down. You can just cut it down. The oil one has a little step in it. I don't know how blown out that looks, or if it's focusing at all. But it steps up a little bit. So that one I had to cut and re-weld. That way I still had this step up. There's little rings in here to seal it up. Alright, another thing I try to clean up on this is your oil fill cap. So originally these have a big old tube that kind of bends and comes up here. You can see it in my earlier videos. All I did was I took that off, and you can thread this straight down in there. So it doesn't stick up so high. So if you're wondering about taking that tube out, it's not a problem. I don't think it's been leaking out of there at all from extra pressure or anything, but that's something you do to kind of make your engine look better. Obviously that was a big concern. I don't want my engine being hideous. I know a lot of people really hate how these engines look, but they function well, so you just do what you can to make it look better. This gigantic snaked radiator hose. I think this is just from a Silverado. You know, I wish I had more money to run a radiator that has the inlet coming from here straight over. I know they make some different water pumps where it actually exits out straight and runs over. When I go to change my intake, I'll probably deal with that a little bit more. The down hose also, let's see if I can show you that. So there's the down, that's the down hose coming out of the bottom of the radiator. I'm not very good with that word. It's a radiator, but it's actually RAD. That's the hose I used. Another one I didn't get to go over. In the earlier videos you saw me, I just used the heater hose right here because I didn't have my, I have a Vintage Air, just a heater defrost box. So what I did is I ran these back. That's just a light in here. It's hard to see in here without, when I film. You guys can tell I don't film very often, but I just ran those up and over here, and then they go through my firewall on the side. I just wanted it to be tucked and clean. I got these real cool little aluminum through firewall mounts. I also shaved that firewall, all those holes. I haven't ground everything down yet, but over here you have to add on because there's where your blower motor goes through. There's a little piece. So I'll be getting to that later. We'll talk about my truck color and paint and things later, but there's a ton of rust everywhere that I'm dealing with. So yeah, I filled that whole firewall, but as you can tell, a lot of the weld is still there. I just use MIG welder, so it kind of, you know, leaves a lot of metal on top. I wish I had TIG so I could let that puddle sit down in the metal a little bit more, but I don't. Since we're talking about the heater, this is the Vintage Air heater defrost setup. I just mounted the controls off of this top lip in there. I just made a little L bracket and mounted those up. I wanted the heater defrost to tuck up as much as I can. You know, these are my defrost hoses running over. There's all my PCM set up. My wiring for the heater, I didn't really loom any of that or tuck it back yet. It's just kind of sitting in there. There's my OBD2 port. But I wanted this to sit up high. I know the factory one hangs down. I made a little bracket. That little aluminum piece you can see is a kind of a weird bracket I made for it. And like I said, I got my wiring all hanging down at the bottom. I keep meaning to mess with it. I just haven't got to it yet. And I'll talk about these kick panels and door panels later. But I made these little aluminum kick panels for my truck to make it clean it up. Plus I had a bunch of rust over there I didn't really want to look at. So that's the heater setup. I just didn't want it hanging down as low. So once I clean up that wiring, it will kind of make the truck look a little better. Because of their setup, it dumps the lines out on the passenger side. Well, your blower motor has 2 layers of metal, so I had to cut this big old chunk out, which is fine, kind of just ugly cuts, but I cut that out so my hoses and everything could fit over there, because I needed to reach the little firewall pieces that I have in there. I like it, trust me, I'm not complaining, but it was a decent amount of work to try to get that thing up high. I know a lot of people, I don't know how they run it, but they usually run it on the driver's side of the heater, but that seems really hard. I really want to tuck it up and keep it cleaner, except for this wiring. I know I keep whining about it. I just hate seeing wiring hanging down, but I haven't got to it yet. I ran my air cleaner straight here. I get it. It's not the cleanest. the ducting to run it over, you know, they call them like cold air intakes. It runs it over behind your headlight kinda, and it's kind of cooler air, but it's kind of stagnant air. I see the pros and cons of both. My engine bay is so open, obviously. I don't even have my fender well on right now. It's kind of getting ready to grind some welds down over there, but I just ran it right there. It's easy. I don't even remember what it is. A Spectra air cleaner. It's just a cheap thing. I think I got it from O'Reilly's. But it fits right there. I got some room. Engine runs fine. I haven't had any issues. Yes, I would love a cold air intake, but eventually I'm going to change this actual intake out to something that looks way better than that. So whenever I do that, I'll actually run some ducting and maybe see if it works better if I ran it over behind the headlight or to a cleaner air setup. Alright, so you guys just watched the engine running. So it did run. It was awesome. So this right here is your throttle position sensor. If you have a drive-by-wire electric signal that comes through this line, goes into here and controls how open your throttle blade is. Behind this black box is the throttle position sensor. My truck was running. I was driving around. It was fine. It was amazing. I couldn't believe I actually had power in my truck finally. I could merge and get on the highway, and it was awesome. But then I kept having a code come up, and I forgot what it was. I'll try to look up the code number, but it kept popping up, and it goes into limp mode, which is the most frustrating mode it could possibly be. So what happens is, if your computer thinks that your throttle is having an issue, obviously that's a big safety, so it just shuts down and basically just idles you around town, which is about 10 miles. So that sucked. It kept happening. You have to shut off your key, wait a little bit, turn it on, it resets it, it lets you drive a little bit, and then does it again. So in like the 2 miles back and forth to the gym, some days it would do that 10 times where I had to pull off the side of the road in traffic or wherever, didn't matter, it doesn't care, and just idles me down. Basically your gas pedal doesn't work, which is unreal, especially after you're spending thousands of dollars on the engine swap and you just can't believe that you're trying to decide if you should have just thrown a carburetor on there and not been an idiot, put an LS engine in it, just because electronics scare everyone, and that scared me. I was really afraid that I made a big mistake and there was no going back at that point. But all I did is I actually drove my truck to the salvage yard and kept swapping throttle bodies out until I found one that worked, because apparently this is a big common issue. Be aware, these sensors go bad. And another reason why I didn't notice it is because when the guy pulled my engine for me, the chain actually ran across here and cracked this throttle position sensor. Well, I went and bought one from the salvage yard, and I just assumed it worked because it didn't look like there would be any damage to it. So that was also on me. I assumed that wasn't the problem, so I problem solved everything else, which ended up being this. So be aware. And one day, I promise, I'm going to slow down on my talking, but my brain works a lot faster than my mouth. Alright, something else I didn't talk about was the accelerator pedal, the gas pedal. These drive-by-wires have that black box that you're seeing with the purple terminal coming out of it. So you have to mount that. So what I did, if you can see, is I made this little S bracket right there. And the most stable bracket that you have up there is your brake, I say to your booster, but your master cylinder bracket that comes and mounts your steering column. So I made a little S bracket off that. It's stable, it's fine. I think I used 3/16 steel, and I had to cut it, weld it, and stuff like that, but it works. It's stable. It put the gas pedal where it needs to be. I like it. But sorry, my wiring's gross. right, later.
In this picture you can see I had a 2-piece drive shaft on a short bed, which I thought was kind of crazy. And so I wanted a 1-piece because the carrier bearing issues that come with the 2-piece, it's kind of a pain. I've already had to replace it once. This aluminum drive shaft should be a little lighter, especially not having the U-joint in the middle. But I had to get that shortened, and the drive shafts from the Envoy XL. Another issue you can see is that the drive shaft is quite a bit bigger. So I had to cut into my cross member that my trailing arms mount to, and I made a bigger hoop for that and welded that onto the cross member to strengthen it all back up. Now it works fine, but also because my truck is so low, you kind of have to watch your transmission angles and all that stuff.